So let me ask you this, would you be able to take this desktop layout and make a tablet and mobile phone layout using the same design? Many newcomers to UI UX struggle with this very thing, and that's what we'll be doing in this video. I'm going to take this design and show you all of the layout adjustments you would need to make when making this layout responsive. So let's get started. If you enjoyed this video, check out DesignCourse.com where you can learn UI UX, CSS, and more with my custom interactive platform that makes learning fun and easy. Okay, so the design that we're going to use is right here. This is from Sayla Ahmed. And I found this on the Figma community, and it's just a good landing page for a desktop only. And it's our responsibility as a designer in this fictional scenario to create a tablet version and a mobile version. So let's go ahead and click open in Figma. This is going to be available in the YouTube description. You can click the same link, and then that way you can follow along with me. So once you do that, you'll see we have a design right here. And if we click on that pages, design pages, this is what we have. So what's cool is we can change the background of this canvas right here. I don't like not being able to see a nice edge on the outer portion of the design. So I'm just gonna change the canvas background color to something like almost black. Okay, so what we wanna do is get, before I get to this part, I really wanted to stress, it's very important that when it comes to your designs, and especially the front-end developer who implements your vision of what the responsive reality of this design is going to be, it's very important that they work on every single size. And so what I mean by that is if I click Chrome here, and we have a browser open, and I drag this browser from the right to the left, for instance, this might be like a tablet, this might be a phone, right here is like a small desktop, maybe like a laptop. Right here is a large 4K, maximized version of the layout. It's really important that the design works everywhere. Not just for a bunch of devices like an iPhone 14 or whatever it's at currently and whatever, like a few designs. I'm talking about every single pixels from here to here to here to here. It needs to be perfect. Why? Because there's so many different mobile devices, so many different laptop sizes, desktop size, screen sizes, tablets and mobile phones. So don't get fixated on trying to just tackle a few different widths, so to speak, device widths. You need to make sure that it works everywhere, okay? And part of that's more easily envisioned when you get into the front-end development process with CSS, because you have that browser to be able to pull this in and out. And of course, you can use things like auto layout here in order to mimic that as much as possible. But I just wanted to throw that one caveat out there. It's obviously going to be impossible for us to take a design like this, especially this design really didn't utilize things like auto layout. It's going to be impossible for us to take this design and do like a million iterations at smaller and smaller viewport widths or the frame sizes. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take if we go to the frame tool and we go to tablet, for instance, and we click on Surface Pro 8. Well, this is already a tablet size basically. It's this exact Surface Pro 8 size. So really this design would benefit from a larger viewport width as well to simulate what it's supposed to look like on a maximized 4K browser. So anyhow, with having said that, let's click on iPad mini, and this is iPad mini 8.3. So this is a good area, a good middle ground for a tablet size or a medium tablet size, so that we can start to make changes to this design. So let's start just at the top with the navigation. And by the way, we can also, while we're here, go to phone, and we'll just do iPhone 14 and 15 Pro Max. Okay, so let's start with the nav bar. If I take this whole thing and I hit Alt, left click and drag over, it'll go inside of our iPad mini. Now, the name of the game here, and this is especially important to note if you don't have much experience with responsive design, the name of the game is just to look at the available width that you have to you and make adjustments to your elements accordingly. So there's a bunch of factors that we can come in, like font size, for instance. Does the logo need to be as big as it is here as it is on desktop? No, it doesn't. There's nothing saying it has to be smaller, but this is just gonna be a decision, a logical decision that makes more sense. So it was size 50, now I'm gonna change it to 40. Now I'm gonna move this over here. And then we also had another element in this group, which is right over here. So it's off the side. And look, we're running into an issue. This is an issue. So how can we combat this? Well, unfortunately, they didn't use auto layout here for these 5 elements. If I click it, we can put auto layout in for us manually. And now we can just kind of bring this in. So we can reduce the white space as a means of trying to getting and fitting all this stuff in. But still, it's going to be way too cluttered. I mean, we have this running into this. It's just not enough room. So what do? Well, one mistake that newcomers make is what they'll do is, let me just take this entirely right here. They'll get rid of all this stuff. They might go to plugins, Iconify. I suggest getting that plugin if you want a nice plugin for just quick access to some icons. We type in menu and maybe we'll get, I really like this menu over here. We'll get a hamburger icon and they'll just kind of shove a menu right here. And they just completely got rid of all the navigational stuff, this login and sign up. That's not what you want to do. That's not the default thing that you should just revert to. You have a lot of space here that is not being utilized. So then you have to ask yourself, what is the most important elements that exist within this navigation and this secondary nav for the login and sign up that we should choose to include, and what is it that we should choose to omit? So a lot of that ultimately comes down to, in the end, when it's live, to testing. However, you have to make some educated guesses when we're in the design phase. So for us, or for myself, what I would do is I would probably take the 3 most important links from here. Maybe it's home, product, and the FAQ. And then also login and sign up and see if we can get them in that way. So in that case, I'll just go ahead and copy this. We'll paste this right here. I will get rid of this and this. Now we have home, product, and FAQ. We could also, again, put in an auto layout, reduce the white space just a bit. And then we could put login and sign up here next to a hamburger menu where we can access the other information that we chose to omit. All right, so that right there seems to be like a pretty decent middle ground for both of these. And you want to make sure everything's here centered up. And then another thing to do is you need to define your margins for each viewport width. So for instance, what I'm talking about is if I hit Shift R and we get a guide right here, so maybe we move this over here, we want to make sure we have equal white space over here as well. So if I hit the rectangle tool, for instance, we can get an exact measurement of what this would be, and we could just drag another one right there. Now we can go to delete that, push this to the edge where it should be, and there we go. So there is our tablet version of the navigation. Very simple. So Shift R will toggle that off. So now what we could do is we could take this and we can further make adjustments over here. So what I would do is take the logo. Of course, we want to have the logo present at all times for branding. And I'll make the size, the font size of this, maybe we can go to like 28. There we go. So we went from 50 to 40 to 28. And we're going to take this over here and then also move this right here. So we have a login, our sign up. Let's make sure this is kind of centered. There we go. And our button here. And once again, you want to make sure that you're defining your white space. So we could probably come over here, push this right there. And one more. That way we're making good decisions and everything is equal in terms of white space. So Shift R, get rid of that. And there we go. So we've now created a responsive navigation. You could go much smaller than this because there are phones that are a lot smaller in terms of the available space. So this is 430 in terms of width. And then what you would do is start omitting, I would omit the login and just keep the sign up and so on and so forth. So forth. All right, so let's move that up. There we go. So now we have our responsive navigation. It's fully ready to rock. Now, what about this section? There's a lot happening here, and this can become very confusing. But you have to take a step back and kind of look at the grand picture from a macro perspective. So let's say, for instance, you're on the moon, you're looking at the Earth, you're at a very macro, a large perspective. what's happening here, if we look at this hero section specifically, we have two columns. We have a column of stuff here on the left and a column of stuff here on the right. And when you're thinking about responsive design, and many times when we're looking at a layout from desktop and we want to transition it to something smaller like on a tablet, then we just have to think in terms of columns and rows. All right, so right now these are in two columns. They're next to each other. So there's a lot of space. There's enough space width-wise in the current viewport. And the viewport's just a fancy way of saying like a browser or something on a device of some sort. But what if we run out? Like we can't take this and just move it over here. Now, we could if we used units like viewport width and percentage widths in CSS and just kind of scaled everything down. I can't do that right now because I'm the way I pasted that. So for instance, what I could do is use my screenshot tool just to quickly demonstrate. You don't have to follow along. And I could just paste this in right over here and I could just scale everything down equally. You can completely do this with CSS. However, when you do that, chances are your type will, if you have type that's pretty small on the desktop, it's gonna get too small over here. So you can't just scale everything down equally, especially when we're talking about type that needs to be large enough to be readable. So what we do instead is we, instead of keeping two columns, we're gonna stack them on top of each other into two rows, okay? So here's how we do that. Another consideration that newcomers will have a difficult time is in this context, do we put the illustration on top on our tablet, or do we put it underneath? Do we get rid of it? Because you have that ability, you can add and remove things at any side or at any viewport width. CSS allows us to do that with media queries. So what I would do personally is I would take this whole section right here and hit Alt and just drag it over. And we wouldn't want to leave it like this because that's a lot of screen real estate that it's going to eat up. All right, so I would make some finer adjustments to this. So what I would do is take this, I would move it up. All right, something more of like a banner size. We have access to this individual here. We can scale him down just a bit, maybe put him here just temporarily, and then we're going to expand this all the way out. Okay, now Shift R and make sure we're adhering to our guides. There we go. This right here, see, this little form that is designed, I'm gonna choose to not include that. And that's fine, that's something that you can completely do. You only wanna keep what you absolutely need. So perhaps we could put this over here. We could put this over here. And again, this is all achievable in CSS. There's nothing really that difficult about it. That would be cool right here. And there we go. So there's some other stuff that we can get rid of. Shift R, and that looks great. All right, so now we could take this whole section over here, Alt, drag it over. We could leave it just like this, and I think for the most part I will, but I do want to scale down the size. On a tablet, this would be really large in your face. On a desktop, not so much. So we're going to reduce the size from 80. Let's try to say size 60. Nah, let's go 50. We could reduce the line height as well. And we can also center it. We don't have to center it, but you can. So we'll center the text and then center the element up here with these centering. This is horizontal, this is vertical. And it's not centering properly because it was grouped up. There we go. Now we can center it properly. So there's our headline. Now we're gonna go ahead and take this, move this up here. Maybe we could scale it just a bit. And then we could take this element, we could center it as well. So center the text and center the type. And then for these two buttons, we could just leave them just like this in a two-column approach. We have plenty of space, so no adjustments specifically are needed to be made on that. Now we could take them and we could scale them up. In this case, the text doesn't scale when we do that, so we can change this from 18 to 24, maybe make it bold. This button's a little bit thick there, THICCC. So that right there is a solid representation of this hero section transformed into a tablet. Now there is a little bit of a green background, kind of like radial gradients. I'm just gonna I'm not gonna recreate that. I'm just gonna take a flat color, use a bracket key or left bracket to put it in the back, and then hit I for the eyedropper tool and just get this green right there. There we go. So now we have our green text. A little bit coming in, the designer kind of used some type that's doesn't quite contrast well enough, so this change should be made on the desktop version as well. But what I like to do is take the background it's sitting on, and there we go. That's a lot better than having gray on a light green. Okay, anyway, so there we go. That's that one. Let's go ahead and take this over here, and let's put it in the back, left bracket. There we go. And now let's focus on this section. So again, what would we do here? Well, let's take this over, holding Alt. And again, let's get our Shift R, make sure our guides are being adhered to. Double click this element, we can move this in. Move this up, we don't need it to be quite that high. I don't know where this went. Oh, I think it went off the screen, that's no big deal. All right, and we move this in perhaps. We can adjust this person, we see a little bit more of them. There we go. And we could choose not to have the credit card there as well, it's okay. CSS can hide these at certain viewpoints. Okay, so now let's take this element, and really this stuff is pretty much all gonna be the same. So we take this, and again, we'll scale this down to like 30. Get that centered. Scale this down. And we're gonna do this a few more tries. We're not gonna do the whole landing page, that would take a long time. I think it would be a great practice after you get done watching this, to go ahead and try to tackle the rest of the design yourself. All right, again, I was just making font size changes essentially, and just keeping the same approach here, because again, there's only one element here on this row, one element here, one element here. We haven't used any columns, so we really don't have to make adjustments outside of adjusting for white space and font size and scale. So now what we could do is take this free trial. These are in 2 columns. At this size, we wouldn't be able to put them next to each other. You may be able to put them next to each other here if you make them small enough to type, you know, keeping this 2-column approach. But we could also do this, and this is a very standard pattern on most smartphone devices. You could just take the element and make it pretty large. You don't have to go all the way out if you don't want to. You could keep it right here if you wanted to. It's kind of it's okay either way. And then just take this and put that here as well, and there we go. That's our design, and that's the hero section. So we could put this right here, put this like right here or so. All right, now we have this section. This section's very easy. When it comes to this headline here, let's go ahead and drag these out so we have a little bit more room to work with. More than 25,000 teams use collabs. All right, so let's take this whole section. We're gonna have to scale this down because, as you can see, it's extending outside of our red guides right here. So we could hold Alt and just drag this in. We don't necessarily have to change the size of the font. And then this right here, you could think to yourself, okay, well, if it's really important that all of these are visible at all times, we can separate them into 2 rows, for instance. Or when it comes to something like this, these logos, you can make a scrolling element for tablet only and phone only, where it'll just infinitely kind of create a marquee where it's just going across the screen and just infinitely looping. I think that would be a good use case here. And in that case, you don't have to really worry about staying within the confines of these guides. So now what I would do is just take this over here, and I would probably scale these down, although I don't think they're made scalable. If I right click and I choose flatten, then we could do that. So now I can scale it down a little bit more, so like that. This type should be maybe about 30. And we also want to drag this in and center it. I think I like that better. So now we can center that. Ooh, it's kind of not centering in the context of what I would think. That's kind of strange. Anyhow, the center looks to be right here. And then we'll put this here. There we go. Shift R. And that's that section. All right, let's do one more, and this one's kind of a more complex section. By the way, I absolutely hate this color that this designer chose to use. It's gray next to a green. I don't like that. We could just honestly probably just make this a white background like that. That's a lot better. Okay, so now let's go ahead and focus on this part. And this is more complex layout because you have multiple things happening here. From a macro perspective, you have two columns. We have this column and we have this column. But getting into this column, well, we could see we have two rows up. We have three total rows. 1, 2, 3. However, within the third row, we have two columns. And then over here, we actually have two columns in 3 rows. So you have a column here, here, or a row here, sorry, a row here, here, and here. But in each one, you have 2 columns. You have the icon, and then you have this accompanying text. So there's a lot of ways that you could manipulate these columns and rows. There may not be an absolutely perfect, one solution fits all or whatever. Did I really just botch that saying? Anyway, there could be multiple approaches that are going to be just as good as others, okay? So here's how I would personally approach this. So I would probably take our headline, which in the context of what's called visual hierarchy. In other words, what visual hierarchy is we're giving like the most important elements, we're gonna make those the biggest and the thing that catches the eye the most. In this case, it's the headline because it's the biggest element. So I'm gonna start with that element. And so what I'm gonna do is we'll take this and we're gonna put that right here. Again, Shift R, make sure we're adhering to our guides here. And in this case, I think what we could do is we can make a 2-column approach here. So if I make this like a 50% column, and then we take these ratings down here. Sorry, let me get into that. And hit Alt. Then what we could do is I could put 1 here, and then 1 here as well. Let's reduce the line height slightly. All right, so we have the space to do this as well. So if I hit Shift R to get rid of that, we're really almost running out of space. We're getting very close, but we can have a 3-column approach in this context right here for this design specifically. Outside of that, then what I would do is just keep this flow right here. If it was any smaller, where we have 2 columns down here and then all situated in 3 rows, exactly as you see it over here. All right, so having said that, if I switch over to our mobile, then we could take these 2 elements. And again, we'll want to use the same font size as the one above. So that's 30. This is going to be 30. All right, and drag this in. Okay, Shift R. And then we'll take this one. We're going to extend this all the way out. There we go. And then for the elements beneath it, like right here and here, we can just keep those in a 2-column approach. Or we could just take this one and do a space between, like with Flexbox, and keep them separated like that. And then one final thing is what would we do with this stuff over here in the 2nd column? All right, so what I would do is we have options. So this is another thing that really trips up beginners quite a bit. Let's just take this, hold Alt, get it replicated. We could do a 2-column approach, except only one, like the top one where it says publishing, will consume the 100% width or just 1 column. This can be a 2-column approach underneath it. So here's how this works. We can move this over here. We can double click into this area and just extend out that section. Then we can take this over here and we can make sure this paragraph kind of ends right there, and then do the same thing with this element. So we could take it, make sure it's all aligned along the same column, and there we go. This is supposed to have a space there. There we go. All right, so this completely works as well. If we wanted these to be equal with 3 lines, we could just push that over slightly. There we go. And this is perfectly acceptable way to deal with the responsive layout adjustment for this section. All this is achievable within CSS with Flexbox and especially the grid. So now what would we do for this section? This is actually very simple. So all I would do is just take this, we'll put it right there, and you have a couple options. I'll show you. I'll replicate the difference here. So if we have two of these, I'll show you the difference. So if I take this, we can move this kind of maybe right there, and then we'll assume that this is that these are the analytics. I want to move fast. So we can lay them out like this, which is perfectly fine, but we could also do this. We can move it underneath the icon, and that's going to take up a little bit more vertical screen space, but it's still something that you can do. It's an option at your disposal. So you could do this as well. And of course, we want to move these in. Here, let's go ahead and just delete that one. There we go. Now notice how much space that ends up eating up though. So I would personally use this until you ran out of space on perhaps even smaller mobile sizes. So that's the thought process. What I would suggest you do, by the way, is I would take, if you followed along, I would take what you learned from this brief demo and try to apply it to the rest of the elements in this design. So the next element would be, for instance, this section here, a 3-column approach. Okay, how will we adjust that? I mean, would we take this over here and maybe just stick with 2 columns, like where we have the type here as well? Okay, that kind of looks not good. So personally, I would probably extend out the width of this element right here. We could put this here. Does it make sense to also put the get started over there? Because you want things to be as even out as possible. So you could potentially do this. You could also move this over here and just kind of put them all in, you could greatly simplify it and just put them all in rows stacked on top of each other as well. So that's what I would do if I were you. If you're trying to get practice, go ahead and, I have a Discord server. It's linked in the YouTube description. You can share your work if you wish in the Discord server, the public one. And yeah. So go ahead and try to finish the rest of this and see what you come up with. Hopefully this was helpful for all of you. I would probably want to space out some of these things a little bit more. There we go. That's just the designer in me trying to push things towards perfection. I mean, I obviously did this very quickly. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful. If it was, make sure to subscribe up for more design, UI, UX, and front-end development content. Definitely check out DesignCourse.com if you want to learn how to design like this and way more in my UI, UX course. So there's always coupons as well. Anyhow, I'll stop talking, and this is already a long video, and I will see you all very soon. Goodbye.